Chicago had always been loud sirens, traffic, drunks shouting outside the bars on Lincoln Avenue. But now, during lockdown, the city was suffocatingly still. The streets were a graveyard. The air felt heavier, and for Daniel Harper, trapped inside apartment 3B, the silence was starting to sound alive. For weeks, the apartment had been his cage. Days blurred into nights. He barely noticed when morning came or when it left. The glow of his laptop screen was the only sun he had. At first, the solitude was manageable. But by the third month, Daniel began hearing things. The building creaked like it was breathing. The pipes groaned like someone crying through the walls. Every flicker of the old ceiling light stretched the shadows into something unnatural. And then came the night when it changed. It was just before midnight. Daniel was lying on the couch, scrolling mindlessly, when his phone froze. The screen flickered, the Wi-Fi icon vanished, and his service bars dropped to nothing. Not even an signal. The apartment felt muted, like something had swallowed all connection to the outside world. And then 3 knocks. Knock, knock. Slow, heavy, hollow. Daniel froze, the phone slipping from his hand. Nobody should be at his door. Deliveries never came this late, and no one in the building had dared wander the halls in weeks. Swallowing hard, he walked toward the front door. Each step echoed too loudly in the tiny apartment. His heart pounded as he leaned into the peephole. The hallway was empty, but the corridor light was stuttering, buzzing like a fly in a jar. The shadows stretched, twitching against the peeling wallpaper. Something about the way they moved felt wrong, as if they belonged to things that weren't there. Daniel stepped back, breath shallow. Maybe a prank. Maybe the building settling. Knock, knock, knock. This time the sound came from inside, behind him. Daniel spun. The bedroom door had creaked open wider. His skin went cold. He hadn't opened that door. The air inside the apartment was different now, thicker. Every breath felt like swallowing dust. The silence pressed against his ears until it rang. Grabbing the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, Daniel clicked it on. The weak beam quivered in his shaking hand as he inched toward the bedroom. The room was still, bed unmade, desk littered with coffee mugs. Nothing unusual until the light caught the mirror. The tall, cracked mirror leaned against the far wall, an old thrift shop find. Something he had meant to throw out, but never did. The glass shimmered strangely, as if something moved beneath its surface. Daniel's reflection stared back, pale, exhausted eyes, jaw tight with fear. And then, behind him in the reflection, someone else appeared. A woman. Her skin was ashen, her tangled black hair draped across her face. She stood so close behind his shoulder that Daniel should have felt her breath. But the room was empty. His hand tightened around the flashlight until his knuckles cracked. He spun around. Nothing, only the stale, dark air. He looked back at the mirror. She was still there, closer. The beam of light trembled across the cracked glass as her head tilted slowly to one side, hair sliding away from her face, just enough to reveal eyes. Empty sockets, black holes that swallowed the light. Daniel's throat tightened. The flashlight dimmed, flickering, and then she spoke. Her voice crawled into his ear like a swarm of insects, though her lips never moved in the reflection. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." The bedroom door slammed shut behind him. The light died, and Daniel Harper realized with choking horror. Lockdown had trapped him with something that was never meant to be human. Daniel didn't remember falling asleep. All he knew was that when he opened his eyes, he was lying on the bedroom floor. His neck ached, his flashlight was dead beside him, and the mirror loomed silently against the wall. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, but it brought no comfort. The reflection was normal, now just him, pale and hollow-eyed. Number. Woman. No whispers. No empty sockets, staring back. For a moment, Daniel almost convinced himself it had been a dream, a nightmare fed by isolation and too much caffeine. But when he stood, his feet crunched. The hardwood floor was scratched. Long, deep grooves carved into the wood, as if by fingernails dragging across it in the night. The lines led directly to where he had been lying. Daniel's stomach lurched. He stumbled into the living room, desperate for his phone. Dead battery. He plugged it in, but the screen remained black. Router, lights off, laptop. Even the digital clock on the microwave was blank. The entire apartment was cut off. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. By afternoon, Daniel tried to distract himself. He made coffee, cleaned dishes, reorganized shelves he hadn't touched in months. But every room felt wrong, as if the walls themselves were watching. In the mirror, he couldn't stop glancing at it. Each time, the reflection looked normal. Each time, he told himself he was imagining things, until evening fell. The sun dipped below the buildings outside, plunging the apartment into blue-gray shadows. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the mirror across the room. He told himself not to look, not to move, but his eyes betrayed him. In the reflection, the bedroom door slowly creaked open. Daniel's head whipped toward it. The door was shut. He looked back at the mirror, open, wider now. Shadows spilling from the gap. The air grew colder, his breath fogging faintly in front of his face. Then, a sound, faint, rhythmic, like fingernails tapping glass. Click, click, click. Daniel's eyes darted to the mirror. The woman was back, half hidden in the shadows, her pale hands pressed against the inside of the glass, dragging her nails down the surface. Screamy. The sound rattled inside his skull, sharp and metallic. She was closer than before, her face pressed against the crack in the mirror. Hair clung to her cheek like wet seaweed. Daniel stumbled backward, heart hammering. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This isn't." The lights in the apartment went out. Darkness swallowed him whole. The sound of nails scraping glass grew louder, faster, like claws desperate to break through. And then silence. Daniel stood frozen, sweat trickling down his spine. The room was pitch. His ears rang in the void. From the corner, in the direction of the mirror, came a sound that wasn't tapping dot, breathing dot wet, shallow, right behind him. He didn't turn. He couldn't. And then, just over his shoulder, a whisper colder than ice slid into his ear. "I'm already inside." Daniel didn't sleep. He couldn't. He sat in the corner of the living room, knees drawn to his chest, clutching the dead flashlight like it was a weapon. His eyes stayed fixed on the mirror, though in the dark he could see nothing. Only the faint outline of the cracked frame in the pale glow of the moon through the blinds. Every so often, he heard it. The breathing. Sometimes it was shallow, like someone holding their nose an inch from his ear. Other times it was labored, like lungs filling with water. But no matter where he turned, the sound seemed to follow. Hours crawled by. At some point, Daniel must have dozed off, because when he jolted awake, the first thing he noticed was the mirror. The crack in the glass had spread. Yesterday it was small, a single fracture. Now it spiderwebbed across the surface, splitting his reflection into warped fragments. And in one of those fragments, he saw her, the woman, her face pressed against the other side, eyes wide and empty, her mouth moving soundlessly. Daniel scrambled to his feet. "Get out," he muttered, voice shaking. "You're not real. You're not." The words died in his throat, because her hand pressed against the glass. And this time, the glass bulged inward, bending like plastic wrap under pressure. Daniel's chest tightened. He backed away until his spine hit the wall. The bulge grew, her pale fingers pushing further. The sound of cracking glass filling the silence. Then it stopped. The mirror returned to normal. No woman, no hand, just his fractured reflection, staring. Back. Daniel slid down the wall, trembling, his breathing ragged, chest aching from panic. That's when he heard it again. Not from the mirror this time. From the kitchen. Drip, drip, drip. Daniel turned his head slowly. The faucet was off. He was sure of it. But water was pooling on the floor, spreading toward the living room. No, not water. Darker, thicker. He staggered to his feet, stomach twisting as the smell hit him. Metallic, copper, blood. The puddle stretched wider, seeping under his bare feet. He staggered backward, eyes darting around the kitchen. The faucet was bone dry. The cabinets were closed. The ceiling didn't leak. And then, in the reflection of the microwave door, he saw her again, standing in the doorway, her head tilted, her soaked hair clinging to her face. She wasn't in the mirror. Now she was in the apartment. Daniel spun. Nothing. Just the kitchen. Empty. He let out a strangled laugh, half sobbing. "I'm losing my mind," he whispered. Then something touched him. Cold fingers slid across the back of his neck. Daniel screamed, whipping around. The room was empty. But on his skin, where she had touched him, deep purple marks were already forming, like fingerprints burned into his flesh. The silence broke. Every door in the apartment slammed shut at once. The windows rattled violently. The lights burst back on, flickering erratically. And in the mirror, she was no longer standing still. She was crawling out. Her pale body contorted unnaturally as she dragged herself through the fractured glass, her mouth opening wide in a soundless scream. Shards cut across her skin, black liquid dripping down the floorboards. Daniel grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a chair, and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered, exploding across the room. The reflection was gone. The mirror was gone. But the apartment wasn't empty, because behind him, crouched in the corner where the shadows were deepest, something was moving, something that wasn't human. Anymore. Daniel didn't breathe. The chair lay in splinters across the floor. Shards of glass glittered like ice, catching the twitching light from the ceiling. The mirror was gone, destroyed, but the apartment felt worse. He could feel it in the air, charge, like the moment before lightning strikes. And from the corner, something shifted. He could barely make out the shape, hunched, twisted, limbs bent wrong. It crouched where the walls met, its body swallowed in shadow. Daniel's throat tightened. He staggered back a step, heart thundering so hard it hurt. The thing moved. Not like a person. Not like anything living. Its arms stretched too far, its joints bending the wrong way as it crept along the wall, like a spider. Each movement made the floorboards groan, though its limbs looked thin enough to snap. Daniel's legs jolted into action. He bolted for the front door, yanking at the locks with shaking hands. They wouldn't budge. The deadbolt turned, but the door stayed sealed, like something was holding it shut from the other side. He rammed his shoulder against it. Nothing. He kicked it, cursed, screamed. The wood didn't even rattle. Behind him, the thing hissed. Daniel spun. It was crawling into the light now, dragging itself forward with impossible jerky motions. Its skin was gray, slick, glistening as though water still dripped from it. Its hair clung to its face in soaked tangles. But between the strands he could see its mouth, stretched, grinning, teeth too sharp. Too many. Daniel stumbled backward into the kitchen. His hands scrambled across the counter until they closed on a knife. He yanked it free, holding it out in front of him. "Stay back," he choked, though his voice cracked. The thing froze, head tilting at an unnatural angle. Its jaw opened wider, creaking like rusted hinges, and then laughter. Low, guttural, broken, not human. Daniel gripped the knife tighter. His whole body trembled. The lights above flickered faster, buzzing like a swarm of flies. Shadows jerked across the walls, multiplying the creature until it looked like dozens of them moved with it. And then it lunged. Daniel screamed, swinging the blade. The knife cut through empty air. The thing was faster than he expected, darting sideways, skittering up the wall and across the ceiling like an insect. He dropped the knife. It clattered across the tiles, just as one of its hands shot down claws. scraping his shoulder. Daniel shrieked in pain, stumbling back, his shirt ripped open, skin burning where the marks spread like frostbite. He grabbed a pan from the stove and hurled it upward. The metal slammed into the ceiling, knocking the thing. Down it landed with a wet thud, limbs twitching, before scrambling back into the corner. Daniel ran. He didn't think, he just ran. Through the living room, past the shattered mirror, into the bedroom. He slammed the door shut, pressed his weight against it, and locked it with trembling hands. His chest heaved, lungs on fire. The silence pressed in again. For a moment, he thought it was gone. Then dash, tap, tap, tap. On the other side of the door, he clutched the lock, every muscle tensed. The tapping grew faster, harder, until the wood began to splinter. And then, from behind him, the closet door creaked open. Daniel froze. His eyes widened in the dark. A pale hand was already reaching out. The bedroom was suffocatingly still. Daniel's lungs froze in his chest as he stared at the hand curling out of the closet. It was pale, almost translucent. Thin veins pulsed beneath the skin like writhing worms. The fingers were too long, ending in cracked, yellowed nails that screeched against the wood as they dragged outward. Daniel backed against the far wall, trembling so hard his teeth rattled. His eyes locked on the gap as the door inched wider. The hand was followed by another, then a head, her head. The woman's face slid into view through the crack, sopping black hair plastered to gray flesh, mouth opening wider than a jaw should. Stretch, her empty sockets locked on him, dripping something thick and black that pattered onto the floorboards. Daniel's body moved before his mind caught up. He grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and hurled it at the closet. The bulb exploded, plunging the room into strobing shadows as sparks fizzed out. The closet door rattled violently. Something slammed from the inside, the frame groaning like it might snap. Then silence. Daniel's breath came fast, chest heaving. He stumbled toward the door, fumbling with the lock, desperate to get out of the bedroom. But before he could turn it, a whisper slithered through the dark, right behind him. "Where will you run?" He spun, back pressed to the door. The closet door was wide open, and it was empty. Daniel's stomach dropped, his vision tunneled. He inched toward the closet, every step feeling like it dragged him closer to his own grave. He lifted a shaking hand, flashlight still dead, relying only on the faint orange glow of the city lights leaking through the blinds. He peered inside. Nothing, just clothes hanging limp. The faint smell of mildew. Then something dripped onto his shoulder. Daniel looked up. She was clinging to the ceiling above the closet, her body bent backward, limbs twisted at unnatural angles, her face inches from his. She smiled, teeth jagged and broken, gums black. Daniel screamed and dove backward just as she dropped. The impact shook the closet, hangers clattering to the floor. He ran, through the door, down the hallway, into the kitchen. He yanked the knife from the floor, where he'd dropped it earlier, and swung wildly, tears streaking his face. "Stay away from me," he shouted, voice raw. The apartment answered with laughter. It came from every direction, from the walls, from the vents, from the broken shards of glass on the floor, high-pitched, guttural, overlapping, like dozens of voices wearing the same throat. Daniel clutched the knife so hard, the handle dug into his palm. His heart thundered, as his eyes darted around, waiting for her to lunge. The laughter stopped. A knock echoed through the apartment. Knock, 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 but not at the front door this time, from under the floor. Daniel froze. His eyes followed the sound as it traveled beneath him, slow, dragging knocks that circled the kitchen like something crawling in the crawl space. The wood beneath his feet buckled. A hand burst through the floorboards, nails tearing into his ankle. Daniel screamed as claws raked deep into his flesh, dragging him down, pulling him toward the splintered wood. He slashed with the knife, steel biting into the pale fingers. Black liquid sprayed across the tiles. The hand recoiled. The hole in the floor gaped open, darkness yawning below. and from that darkness, dozens of pale hands began to rise. Daniel's scream tore through the apartment as pale hands clawed at his legs, dragging him toward the jagged hole in the floor. The wood split wider with each pull. Splinters bit into his skin as he kicked, slashing the knife wildly. Black liquid spattered the tiles, sizzling like acid where it landed. The hands withdrew, but only for a moment. Dozens more replaced them, long skeletal arms writhing upward. Too many to count, fingers clawing like starving animals. They wrapped around his wrists, his ankles, his waist. The cold of their grip sank deep, like frost spreading through his veins. Daniel thrashed. He stabbed downward, blade piercing one of the hands. The thing shrieked, not with a single voice, but with hundreds a chorus of screams that rattled the cupboards and shattered the overhead light. Darkness swallowed the room, and still, the hands pulled. Daniel's body slid across the floor, tiles cracking beneath him as the hole widened unnaturally. It was no longer just floorboards. Breaking it was something else, something that wasn't wood. The darkness below writhed endless, pulsing like a living thing. No, 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 Daniel roared, grabbing at the counter, at the stove, at anything to anchor himself. His fingernails split, skin tearing, but the grip of the hands was stronger. For one horrifying moment, his head dipped below the hole. He saw what lay beneath. Not crawl space, not foundation. A void, an endless, cavernous black expanse, where walls and ceilings breathed like lungs. Shapes moved in the dark, slender, distorted silhouettes dragging themselves across shifting ground made of flesh. Their eyes glowed faintly, sockets like coals in the distance, and they were all looking up at him. Daniel screamed and fought harder, thrashing with animal panic. He stabbed again, black ichor spraying across his chest. A hand released him, then another. His knife slipped, clattering into the pit below. He was half swallowed now, torso sinking into the dark, cold air, choking his lungs. Then, just as his last grip slipped, the hands let go. Daniel tumbled across the kitchen floor, gasping, coughing, covered in sweat and blood. The hole in the tiles snapped shut behind him with a deafening crack, sealing as though it had never been there. The apartment was silent again, but the silence wasn't empty. From the living room, where the shattered mirror lay, came a sound. Wet, shuffling, crawling. Daniel's body went cold. Slowly, he turned his head. From the pile of broken glass, she was rising. The woman, the thing, her body jerking unnaturally as shards slid from her skin. Her grin stretched wide, jaw snapping with each twitch. She stepped forward, bare feet smearing black stains across the floor. And this time she wasn't alone. Behind her, more figures began pulling themselves through the shards. One by one, pale, hollow-eyed, crawling into his apartment like maggots spilling from a corpse. Daniel's chest heaved as he pressed himself against the kitchen counter, staring at the nightmare unfolding before him. They were crawling through the glass. The woman came first, her body twitching as if every joint had been broken and reassembled wrong. Then another, and another. Pale figures, skin glistening with a damp sheen, hollow eyes fixed on him, their mouths opened and closed in silent spasms, like drowning victims still gasping for air. The shards cut their flesh as they dragged themselves free, but they didn't bleed. Instead, thick black fluid oozed, pooling across the floor. The smell hit Daniel's nose, rat mildew, stagnant water that had been festering for decades. "Stay the hell away from me," Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. He grabbed a second pan from the stove, raising it like a weapon. His hands shook, sweat dripping down his temples, but adrenaline surged through his body. The first figure lurched forward. Daniel swung with all his strength. The pan connected with its skull, a sickening crack echoing through the apartment. The figure stumbled back but didn't fall. Instead, its head snapped sideways, neck twisting far too far, before righting itself with a slow, wet click, and then it laughed. Not like a person, not like a single voice. Dozens of voices poured out of its throat, layered and discordant, a broken choir echoing off the walls. Daniel's stomach churned. The others joined in, their mouths stretching impossibly wide. The laughter filled the apartment, rattling the air vibrating in his teeth. Daniel bolted. He sprinted toward the front door, blood pounding in his ears. He rammed his shoulder into it again and again. Nothing, not even a rattle. The wood may as well have been concrete behind him. Footsteps, wet, dragging, uneven. Daniel whirled around, panting, pan still gripped in his hand. "What do you want from me?" he screamed. The woman, the first one, the one from the mirror, tilted her head. Her blackened gums pulled into a grin, and then she spoke, not with her voice, but with his. "You let us in?" Daniel's blood ran cold. No, I didn't." She stepped closer, bare feet smearing black across the floor. "You looked too long." Daniel's stomach flipped. His gaze darted to the shattered mirror, realization dawning like a knife twisting in his chest. The mirror wasn't just a reflection. It had been a doorway. By staring, by acknowledging her, he had invited them across. The laughter returned, louder now, bouncing from every wall. Shadows writhed, stretching taller, filling the corners of the apartment. Daniel staggered back, pressing against the door. "No," he whispered, tears streaking his face. "No, this isn't real. This isn't." The ceiling above him split. With a deafening crack, the plaster tore open. Black fluid rained down as skeletal arms shoved through, clawing at the air. Dozens more of the things began writhing out, dropping into the apartment one by one. Their impact shook the floor, their weight making the old wood groan. The apartment was filling. Daniel ran, desperate, panicking. He dove into the bathroom, slammed the door, and locked it. He pressed his back against it, chest heaving, every muscle trembling. The laughter continued outside, the scraping of nails against wood, the dragging of wet feet, and then silence. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He dared not breathe. Then slowly, his eyes lifted. The bathroom mirror. It was no longer reflecting him. It was a window, and on the other side, dozens of pale faces were pressed against the glass, smiling. Daniel's breath came in shallow gasps as he stared at the mirror. Dozens of faces pressed against the glass, all of them wrong. Their eyes were hollow, their smiles jagged and stretching too wide. Their skin writhed as though something alive slithered just beneath the surface. They weren't just watching, they were waiting. Daniel stumbled back, heart pounding, until his spine hit the bathroom door. The lock rattled behind him, scratching fingers dragging across the wood. The faces in the mirror moved in perfect unison, their mouths opened, and Daniel heard his own voice. "Come inside." He clapped his hands over his ears. "Shut up, shut up." His voice cracked, but the chorus drowned him out, growing louder, echoing with every syllable. "Come inside, come inside, come inside." The glass began to ripple, not like breaking, but like water, liquid. The faces blurred, stretching, reaching forward. Pale hands pressed against the inside of the mirror, fingers leaving streaks on the surface, as though it were fogged glass. The door shuddered. The things outside were pushing harder now. The wood groaned, hinges straining. Daniel looked back at the mirror. His reflection was gone entirely. All that stared back at him were their eyes, burning into him, promising relief or damnation. "No," Daniel whispered, tears spilling down his face. No, I can't." The door cracked. Splinters burst inward, a pale arm jutting through, fingers clawing at the air. Daniel screamed and backed into the sink. The mirror rippled again, the glass bending like a liquid surface, pulling at him. The faces whispered, "Softer now, seductive, we'll keep you safe." The door split wide. The woman's head shoved through, jaw unhinging, mouth stretched impossibly wide, black saliva dripping. Her eyes locked on his dot. Daniel had no choice. He hurled himself into the mirror. Cold engulfed him instantly, like plunging into an icy ocean. His lungs seized. Darkness swallowed him whole, liquid filling his nose, his ears. He flailed, arms and legs striking nothing. Sinking deeper, then dash impact. He hit solid ground, coughing violently, his chest heaving. The air was thick, damp, rotten. He staggered to his feet, his eyes adjusted. He was no longer in his bathroom. He stood in a vast corridor that stretched endlessly in both directions. The walls were made of glass, thousands of panes stacked floor to ceiling, each one fogged, streaked, and vibrating with faint movement behind each pane. Faces, not dozens, millions, all watching, all smiling. Their whispers bled through the glass, overlapping into a constant drone that made his skull ache. Daniel turned and ran, feet slapping against the damp floor, his panicked gasps echoing through the corridor. The glass walls stretched forever, no doors, no exits, just the endless gauntlet of grinning faces. Then, without warning, one of the panes cracked. A pale hand punched through, glass shattering outward. Then another, then another. The corridor came alive as arms tore free, bodies forcing themselves out, tumbling into the hall, their smiles twisted wider, their black mouths opening in unison. Daniel's scream echoed down the infinite corridor as he sprinted blindly into the endless dark. Daniel ran until his lungs felt like fire. The corridor stretched endlessly, the glass walls rattling as though alive. His own reflection fractured 1,000 times, distorted and sneering. He stumbled, knees scraping raw against the damp floor, his breath echoing like a ragged animal's pant. Behind him, the broken panes whispered and groaned as pale figures dragged themselves into the corridor, their bodies twitching with bone-snapping spasms, their smiles still intact. He pressed against the nearest wall, desperate, his palms flat against the cold surface of the glass. And that's when he noticed. The faces inside weren't strangers. They were people, ordinary people. A young woman with streaked mascara, mouth open in a silent scream. An old man, his lips trembling as if whispering a prayer. A child, no older than 10, staring with hollow eyes, clutching a teddy bear that bled black. And as Daniel's gaze swept further, the air left his lungs. He recognized one of them, Mrs. Callahan, his neighbor, her wrinkled face pressed against the inside of the glass, her lips torn at the corners from that grotesque smile. Her eyes bulged with a silent plea. "No," Daniel whispered, shaking his head violently. "No, no, 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 no." The old woman's face twitched. Her lips moved. Daniel pressed closer, chest tight, straining to hear at first. It was only a faint hiss, like static. Then, clear and sharp, her voice bled through the glass. "You shouldn't have looked." Daniel staggered back, heart hammering, nearly slipping on the slick floor. The other faces began to move, lips whispering, muttering, chanting. Dozens, hundreds, a wall of hushed voices building into a maddening drone. Their words bled together until they became one unified whisper. "You belong here. You belong here. You belong here," Daniel screamed, slamming his fists against the glass, desperate to break it. The wall trembled under his blows, but did not shatter. Instead, the faces laughed low, guttural chuckles vibrating through the walls until the corridor shook. From behind him came the sound of shuffling feet. Daniel spun. The things that had dragged themselves from the broken panes were closer now. Dozens of them, their pale bodies contorting, joints bending backward, their wide eyes fixed on him. But they didn't rush him. They didn't leap. They spread out across the corridor, forming a line, trapping him. And then, one of them spoke, not in whispers, not in shrieks, clear human. "Run all you want. You'll never leave." The voice didn't come from its mouth. It came from the wall of glass itself, the chorus of faces speaking as one. vibrating the corridor with inhuman harmony. Daniel's chest tightened. The sound pressed into his skull, making his teeth ache. The figure stepped closer, twitching. Its face slack, but its smile stretched grotesquely. It lifted one trembling arm and pointed deeper into the corridor. Daniel's head whipped toward the direction it gestured. Far down the hall, the corridor split. Two paths, both disappearing into endless dark. The creature's voice rasped again, distorted by countless echoes. Choose. The faces pressed against the glass harder, their mouths opening wider than humanly possible. Rows of broken teeth exposed as they hissed and chanted, "Choose, choose, choose." Daniel's stomach dropped. He looked from one path to the other, panic choking him. The air was thick, suffocating, every breath like inhaling ash. "Which way?" he begged, his voice cracking. "Which way?" The figures did not answer. The faces only smiled, and then, slowly, almost lovingly, every face in the glass turned their eyes to the left-hand path. Daniel froze. His heart thudded painfully. Every instinct screamed to run right, to do the opposite. But his body betrayed him, drawn toward the pull of their gaze, their endless whispers drilling into his skull. His feet moved without command. One step, then another. The corridor seemed to close around him, the whispers rising to a deafening roar. The glass vibrated violently, shards breaking loose and slicing his arms, his face, blood streaking down his skin. Still, he walked into the dark, into the place they wanted him to go. Daniel stumbled through the left-hand corridor, blood streaking his arms from the glass that had cut him, the whispers still gnawing at his ears. The further he went, the more the corridor seemed to breathe. The walls swelled and contracted, exhaling a damp, fetid air that smelled of rot. His flashlight sputtered weakly, its beams swallowed by the blackness ahead, and then he reached it. The corridor ended at a vast chamber. It was a cathedral of mirrors. Dozens, no hundreds of cracked and rotting glass panes towered into the darkness, stacked like gravestones, each one filled with faces, all staring at him, all smiling. Daniel's legs trembled. He couldn't move. His pulse thundered in his throat. The whispers began again, louder, rising into a unified chant that shook the chamber. "Welcome home." The mirrors rattled. Shards broke free and fell, clattering to the ground, but none shattered. Instead, from the largest pane at the far end of the hall, something began to crawl out. At first, it was only a hand, pale, elongated, fingers tipped, with cracked, black nails. Then an arm, a shoulder, and finally, a head. Its face was wrong, not monstrous worse. It looked human. A man's face, expressionless, except for the smile. But its skin sagged, thin and waxy. Its eyes two black pits that seemed to pull the light straight out of the air. It emerged fully, towering, impossibly tall. Its body stitched from dozens of torsos, dozens of arms, as though the mirror world had harvested from every soul it consumed. Daniel's knees buckled. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body was frozen. The creature spoke, not with a mouth. With every mirror in the chamber vibrating, every face inside opening its mouth in unison. "We are the keeper. We are what waits when the world is silent. You looked too long. You opened the door." Daniel shook his head violently, tears streaming down his face. "No, I didn't. I didn't ask for this. None of them did." The keeper turned its head, and Daniel followed its gaze. The faces in the mirrors, the woman, the child, Mrs. Callahan, they are here forever. And now, so are you. Daniel dropped to his knees, sobbing, pounding the floor with his fists. "Please, please, I just want to go home. I'll do anything, anything." The keeper's smile widened. "You already have. You gave us yourself. That is enough." The mirrors around Daniel began to ripple, like water disturbed. The faces pressed harder, their hands slamming against the inside of the glass. cracks spiderwebbed outward, and then, one by one, they began to emerge. Hands first, then heads, then entire torsos, dragging themselves into the chamber. The woman with the mascara-streaked face, the child with the teddy bear, Mrs. Callahan, her lips stretched to splitting. They crawled toward Daniel, their eyes hungry, their smiles endless. He scrambled backward, screaming, but the wall behind him had already sealed shut. The faces swarmed him, pale hands grabbing his arms, his legs, his throat. He thrashed wildly, but their grip was iron. The keeper bent low, its massive shadow engulfing him, its voice thundering through every bone in his body. You will be with us. And when the world outside grows quiet again, when another lonely soul stares too long into the glass, you will help us welcome them. Daniel's mouth opened in a soundless scream as the hands pulled him upward into the nearest mirror. His body passed through like water. The glass rippled and swallowed him whole. And then, silence. The mirrors stilled. The whispers faded. The keeper melted back into the largest pain, its black eyes the last thing to vanish. The chamber was empty, but in one cracked mirror, a new face appeared. Daniel's face. His eyes were wide, his mouth stretched into the same grotesque smile as the others. He pounded the inside of the glass, silently screaming as the darkness claimed him. Outside, in the quiet of the real world, the old apartment building stood silent. Its windows reflected only emptiness. But if anyone had dared walk close enough to peer into the dusty glass panes, they might have seen him, a man's face, just for a moment, smiling, always smiling.